Welcome back to It Tastes Like Burning. This is Matt.
This is Jesse.
We've got our 4th of July extravaganza podcast, and this time we've traveled to distances far and wide, reading Mustache Monthly, and decided to make a stop by with one of our mutual aid departments, and this particular department is solid. And I have nothing but really phenomenal things to say. And I really appreciate the time, energy, and effort and consideration and patience of the chief that I'm about to introduce. I consider him a good friend and even a mentor. And my privilege to introduce Matt.
Yeah, kind words.
I appreciate you taking the time to sit down and talk with us. We'll go into your background here in a second. You've got a long history with just the fire service. And I think personally, just everything that you do with your organization and just the kind of the way your leadership style is, it's appropriate and it works really well for your town. It works really well for your guys. And I think a lot of that just comes from, well, your life experiences. So, Matt, where did you start and how did you kind of get into the whole fire service thing?
So I started here, and at the time I was a manager for AutoZone, or Chief Auto Parts. And then we got bought out by AutoZone back in 1998. And so we moved out here because it was close to where I was working, and I had a volunteer department here. I was like, man, I think I'm going to join. So I did it for a while, and I was like, this is pretty cool. I think I'm going to try to make this my job. So went to EMT school, and some guy was like, hey, man, here's so-and-so's testing. He gave me the phone number, and I had tested at another larger department just north of us, and I did okay, but they have tiebreaker numbers, so I had a bad tiebreaker number, so I knew I wasn't going to get hired. Well, the next department I tested at, I scored like number 7, so total luck. I'm not that smart. But anyways, I got hired, and I've been there for 21 years now, so it's a great gig. I kept volunteering out here because it's what I like to do.
Now, at your career department, obviously, you're a firefighter. Have you moved up in the ranks just through time at the department, or what do you do there with your career?
So it's our department. You move up by testing. So I stayed a firefighter for a good while, trying to get better and learn more, and then I tested for driver. Went to paramedic school, rode the ambulance for a good bit, and back then they didn't let the ambulance go to fires. So there towards the end of my ambulance time, they started letting ambulances go to fires, but I'd had enough. So I tested for lieutenant, and it's strictly score-based. It's civil service, so it's score and how many openings there are. So lucked out, made lieutenant, and then went to a slow station. It was killing me. I could jog 6 miles on the treadmill. So anyways, I wrote a letter saying how new lieutenants shouldn't be at slow stations, and so they changed policy and put me at a busy station. And so I was there for 18 months, lots of fires, lots of runs, lots of good stories, but then I was a victim of my own success. They kicked me out to put a newer lieutenant there. And then they said, hey, you should go to dispatch, which good learning. Now that it's done, it was a good learning experience, but I didn't really enjoy it. But it did motivate me to study for captain. So now I'm a captain, ride the ladder truck. They only call the ladder truck for serious stuff and medical calls when there's nobody left.
How many calls are you running a shift right now?
It varies. The truck's always different. We may just run 1 or 2, or we may run, 7 or 10. So we're not as busy as I'm at a 3-company house. We have an engine, a truck, an ambulance, and a reserve ambulance, which isn't manned. But our engine and ambulance are much busier than the truck. I wish ours was busier, but it's not.
How long have you been doing your career? How long time-wise?
Oh, well, I hired in 2000, so November
Okay.
of 2000, so 20,
22
no,
years.
22 years, yeah.
Okay.
So,
And in that 22 years, did you volunteer the whole time? Did you take a break? Did
no,
you?
I volunteered the whole time. And I actually started here in 98, so I continued to volunteer while I was in fire school and
Okay.
from day one.
So what kept you volunteering?
I like going to fires and driving around the Big Red, just all the stuff that probably most firemen like about the job. So,
And then as your time as a volunteer, you moved up in rank over time. What motivated you to do that? What, because it's easy enough to just say, I'm too busy. I've got this responsibility outside of here. I just want to show up and help when I can.
so I guess initially I just showed up and worked, and they're like, "Oh man, you're good at working on stuff." So they made me like the maintenance guy. So I fixed broken fire trucks and pumps and whatever. And then as I gained experience, they're like, "Oh yeah, you make okay decisions sometimes." So they made me I think a captain or something. Because no, maybe been a lieutenant. I'd go look at the board and tell you. I can't remember. I guess a captain was my first official rank. And so as time moved along, I just saw some things around that I didn't like the way the place was being run. Like we were known out here as kind of like a bunch of rednecks that just tore stuff up, and well, I don't know, it wasn't an image I liked. So I really didn't aspire to be a chief or anything. It just kind of moved up as time went.
And
It's kind of the right place at the wrong time, right?
All right.
That's how I got where I was. It's just the right place at the wrong time.
how long have you been chief here at your volunteer department?
Since '05 ish. I'd have to go look. I think '05.
Okay. And in that time period, what do you think one of the hardest things is to try and do to keep the volunteer organization going? Because you're going to have ups and downs, and I'm not talking about the peaks and troughs. I'm talking about the proverbial march going forward. Because you, as far as I'm concerned, I look at you like us in the sense that you guys are solid and you always make sure you have people, and they're always, the battle's continuing. You always want more. You never have enough, but you guys have been able to maintain, sustain, and even grow in a lot of times when a lot of their organizations are dying the death of 10,000 paper cuts.
Yeah, I think. Well, first we've got a good group of people, so that's what makes it really just your membership. But I guess we're kind of in the peak of, like, I always try to keep growing, new apparatus, or new to us anyway. Try to get the best we can for our money, and so I think as the more runs, so we're in the peak amount of runs too. We still have fun runs. We're about 70% fire, 30% EMS, and people like going to calls, and I don't cancel everybody every time. They drive up here 2 or 3 miles, stop what they're doing, get in a fire truck. Like, oh, you can disregard. So a lot of times I'll just let them come to the scene. I've had the arguments like, oh, it's code 3, it's dangerous, you're burning diesel. But, oh well.
That's a big one, and I've advocated for that for years because it's kind of like the Army. If you don't send them to war every once in a while, they're going to get kind of disgruntled and all that. And does it really cost that much to let them just go ahead and go? And sure, maybe they don't do anything but roll up a hose or block an intersection or whatever,
Well, the one thing I'll add to this is that you've got new people on the department. It is so critical to get them out on a scene. I don't care what it is. They don't care what it is. They don't care if it's literally a cat in a tree or if it's a fire or if it's even
Sweeping the road.
They want to get out on these calls. And if you screw that up in the first couple of weeks of them responding and they're continually getting canceled, No, you will immediately turn them away, and you don't even realize what you're doing. And I can understand if it's like a 45-minute drive to try and get to that spot. But the fact of the matter is our county is small, and realistically, even a very long drive for us in our district. And you guys have the biggest district. Now, I know you've got like one corner that's literally way out there, but realistically for you, everything's within 10 to 15 minutes.
Yep.
And yeah, there's no reason to get them on scene in any capacity, just to let them see it so that they can get that excited release of showing up on scene, and then they can go home and tell their friends, their spouse, whoever, that they did something with the fire department.
Mm-hmm. And it builds that camaraderie, and I don't know. That's why they're here that's what they're here to do, is volunteer. Yeah. So let them.
Yeah. Don't hold them back. The growth of the organization is something that we're particularly focused on right now, and we're taking a little more of kind of like, for the first time that I know of, actual controlled steps in plotting forward. We made a website. It looks sharp. I couldn't believe it. Within 10 days of that website hitting, we actually had a hit off of it, and it turned out to be a pretty big hit. It's the assistant chief for one of the bigger departments there in the Metroplex, and he's retiring. And the fact is that department's big enough that, being an assistant chief, he doesn't get to go do fun things ever. His idea of fun is maybe being able to show up occasionally in a command vehicle, and then at that point, that's not fun.
Just point at stuff.
Yeah. And, he's just looking to get back in the swing of things. I think for us in the long run, true long run, year 1, year 5, year 10, I think that website and trying to figure out the recruiting thing's going to be the only way to truly keep plotting forward. And it doesn't matter the size of your town, because it's not like you need the whole town to show up. You need, God forbid, if you had 1/100th of 1%, you'd have this huge roster. So what are you guys trying to do to, for lack of better words, recruiting, just sustain that growth?
So we have some members that want me to send out mailers requesting people. They want us to have like a 60-person roster, which, it'd be cool, but like from a chief's perspective, like we have to equip all those people. And, right now we're at 35. I think we're about full of our capacity. We have reserves, we have auxiliary, and then I guess our biggest success is our junior firefighter program. So we had several come up, from probably the early 2012, 2013s, had a bunch of high school kids, and several of those are professional firefighters now. A lot of them still volunteer here. Then we had a little bit of a dry spell, and then but now I think we have 6 or 7 juniors, and probably 5 of them are pretty good kids, and the others are good kids. They just this isn't necessarily the main thing they're doing, so they do other stuff, or they just come up here and work out, but you never see them on a call. But I would say our junior program is probably one of the bigger draws we get in here. Like, oh man, this is cool.
How do you do your junior program? Sorry to interrupt you.
So you have to be 16. We kind of go by the best practices set out by like the VFIS Insurance and the Fire Chiefs Association. Basically, you have to be 16. It's just like athletics. You have to no pass, no play. They come to our meetings. They come, our training and business meetings. They can go on calls with us. We don't take them on medical calls, and we don't take them on the highway, because that's the, highway's probably the most dangerous place we work. But they go to fires. We take them to grass fires. We don't put them on first out truck, but they can go on the second or later trucks as long as they're not the only firefighter. They have to be a 3-man truck, and then they're the third guy.
One thing, and I'll dive off to your question in a second. One thing that I tried hard to do with our juniors program, and this isn't putting it on the juniors, it's on the people taking them, is I told them you kind of need to be aware of like the call you're taking them to, because there's a big difference between them showing up to a structure fire and rolling hose, or a grass fire and putting out some cow crap, versus a suicide.
Mm-hmm.
Or some other god awful traumatic injury. And I just told our membership, I'm like, they don't go to that. I don't need a 16-year-old going to that. And I'm not denying reality there. Fact of the matter is the vast majority of people in the country don't respond and go see suicides. And I sure as hell don't need a young kid and that be his first introduction, because that's Murphy. That's exactly what the hell would happen. Is have that kick in the door.
They'll see plenty of that. If they stay with it, they'll see enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They'll see enough later.
There's no rush.
Yeah.
So y'all had a lot of young guys in the recruit academy this time.
Yep.
I did notice that there was an abnormally large number of young men from your department and that recruit academy that I haven't been used to seeing. So are those all juniors coming up, or what?
Yeah, most of them were, I think. So, and my son was in there, and he didn't do as good of a job as I wanted him to. He had come to find out he'd missed a bunch of classes, which I didn't know about. But that's a whole nother story.
But I will say, when he was there, he did good. I mean, he did give it his all. So
yeah, and I'll say that he's been around this his whole life, so he can, he's been helping me pull trucks out and stuff like that since he was 12, and he can pump a truck and probably tell you more about it than some of our members can. But
yeah.
That's no excuse for him. But he's also the reason a lot of the juniors came. Our recent juniors are here because he joined, and one of his buddies joined, and they were always up here. And so that was like, hey, what are y'all doing? Well, we're going to the fire hall. So that's the reason we have so many right now.
Yeah, and whether right, wrong, or indifferent, I looked at all those guys and I was like, yeah, they're gonna do the real deal, and because if Matt sent them up here, they're not idiots, and we gave them as much and hard as we could give them on that. So
yeah, I wish I could say that we had better luck with our juniors program. At the end of the day, for us, it's pretty much a 50-50 wash, and my older generation, that frankly, they are so opposed against it in every capacity that it's just, at the end of the day, it's not, I've got enough battles.
Mm-hmm.
We're having enough of a trickle coming in that I don't have a problem not having a strong juniors program. We're already really young, and that's a blessing and a disguise sometimes. Yeah, having a whole bunch of 16 and 18-year-olds right now, I don't know would actually be a benefit to me. It would probably just be adding more cats to the herd.
The other problem is those ones that are not the old guys and not those ones in the middle have to kind of take ownership of that stuff. And right now, our kind of in the middle guys either already have their hands full with other responsibilities, or they just duck responsibility altogether, which that's just part of it. Some of them are going to do that, and somebody in the middle there has to kind of grab them by the hand and the flipper and take them through the steps of doing what they got to do, because otherwise they're just lost. And that's worse than anything. It's just having a bunch of lost children out there.
Yeah, and we've, every one of our groups of juniors that have come through have gotten into some kind of trouble. We had some that stole some signs, or just teenage kid stuff. But a lot of the members in the early going we need to kick them out. No, man, let's that's how we're going to keep them on the straight and narrow. We keep our thumbs on them. You know, the fire department is the carrot, so we just made them do some community service and wash fire trucks and do some extra training or whatever. That was their punishment. So
novel concept.
Yeah, the punishment's not always removal, and
yeah,
you know, there's a tendency to dive right into that as being what you do for everybody that gets in a little sideways, and that's not necessarily the answer 100% of the time.
Yeah, no, and our organization has always had such draconian overreaction to this stuff. I don't know how to purge it. I know it's coming from the old guard.
Mm-hmm.
I know it, and the problem is that just by proxy, our old guard is going to be in a more leadership role. They're going to be on the disciplinary committees, and you run into this terrible, terrible proxy where out of the gate it's the death sentence, and it's like, how the hell did you start there? And yeah, that's one thing that I have not been successful with, is them not starting at the most absurd pointing. It's like, what in the hell are you doing? And then you run into this problem where, well, the disciplinary committee came up with this decision. I can't really overrule it, because then anyone that screws up, all they're going to do is sprint to me. And they're going to expect me to go through and then start overruling all this crap. So then I interject into the disciplinary committee stuff, and they're starting at the death sentence. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, because the only step above that is actual death. Like, we actually just murder them.
Maybe start give the disciplinary committee some guidance. Like, hey, man, let's start at the lowest level possible.
And that happened. We had a pretty sour event that, needless to say, for me, there was a lot of learning on the chief end for me. And it boiled down to me, it is. This is where volunteer fire departments and being the administration is difficult, because you're not these people's boss. You can't just fire them. That's if God spare you if you operate your department that way, because that would be terrible, and you're failing, and that's why. So probably write that down. But in this particular case, I had a good friend. He screwed up. I made the personal decision, and that's all it is. Instead of, and arguably this is one of the few times where it probably should have been considered, maybe not to death sentence, but maybe something actually pretty extreme. And we didn't do that, and it blew up in my face so bad. And coming out of that, yeah, I immediately changed our SOP on this. Not just this topic, but how to handle pretty much anything that's beyond a slap in the wrist. And yeah, put in a whole process in there, and it's convoluted and it's long. And the fact of the matter is that it's intended not only for the administration's protection, but also for the members' protection. There's nothing wrong with them having the ability to argue why.
Yeah, that's a tough one too, because I've probably lost several friends over it. I mean, were they my friends if they let that get in the way? Yeah, I thought they were at the time, but I mean, yeah, there's probably 3 or 4 people that I don't talk to anymore, just because I had to, like, hey man, you can't respond, you know, if you've been drinking or you know, whatever the situation was. Like, hey, you can't do that. And then they got mad. I'm like, all right, well, yeah, it is what it is.
Sayonara.
Yeah.
Yeah. In '98 though, you probably remember when there was beer in the cooler on the truck.
There may have been at that time.
Yeah, I remember it back in those days.
Was. And it's like, so much has changed since then. I never thought we would have a fire vehicle with air conditioning on it.
That's a big one.
I mean, yeah, that was some of our stuff. Like our EMS squad was like a, I don't know, 88 Suburban.
Yeah,
3/4 ton with a 454 in it, and you could turn the steering wheel like halfway around and you'd still be going straight down the road. You just kind of herded it down the highway. So it's we've come a long way, both in equipment and in personnel and professionalism, I guess.
In 2000, we got a brand new Pierce Contender, and it had air conditioning. That was the first truck in the fleet to have air conditioning. That
God, that'd be terrible.
Everything didn't have air conditioning.
And even back then, it really kind of sucked. I think probably the best thing we've done as far as air conditioning goes in the fire service is putting those RV air conditioners on the top. So when they're sitting in the bay, they're already cooled down. But that made a huge difference.
God, I wish we could do that. I have a feeling the city would shit if we tried to do that, though.
Try it. See what they say.
You just write it into the specs. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. It's for because EMS supplies can't get hot, so you got to keep them cool.
But you know our stance on EMS. So.
Right. Yeah. You don't have to like it. Yeah.
Well, the other thing is just your equipment in general. I mean, we used to lose. We'd probably lose 2 packs a month to dry rotted O-rings and have to get them serviced just because of the heat in the bays. Different brand. I mean, they were all survivors and they were susceptible to that. But literally, the diaphragms would seize up, and you'd 2 a month have to send them off to get them fixed from heat.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I want to dive off into is that our organization is spoiled rotten, and we are cash flush, and we have no needs. We have lots of wants. Your organization is very well equipped, and there's a ton of time, energy, and effort that you've put into building what I would consider more of a traditional, like nationwide volunteer department and the traditional funding structure, whereas I have the benefit of literally city tax revenue continually building my budget and my operation. You have to do a lot more ground pounding. Generally, how have you managed to grow your department without having that guaranteed tax base like I have?
I guess the biggest thing is by providing a really good, valuable service. Like back when I started, we would do chili suppers and hamburger suppers. We probably do 3 fundraisers a year, and then annual donation mailer. And we were always broke. Like we never had money. But our reputation wasn't as good as it is nowadays. But so as time went on, we continued with that, but I always look for grants. It started with the FEMA grants. So we got, that was probably the first one I ever wrote. We got a bunch of radios, or I take that back. First one, we got a bunch of bunker gear. And then I think we got 3 in a row. We got radios, a bunch of stuff, and then a set of extrication equipment, I think. And so then after that, too much red tape and just, oh no, we got a Life Pack 12. That was the last thing we got through a FEMA grant. So, but then all the red tape and just kind of made it prohibitive for us to try to get them. So we started, we do an annual mailer, and like every year that would grow a little bit more. And maybe because growing, but maybe maybe we're providing people recognize we're providing a better service. But then it got to where our fundraisers, we might spend $800 and all the time and effort to make $1,300.
Right.
So it was like we haven't done an actual just fundraiser in probably 6 or 7 years. But we do more, I guess, to build our image by giving back to the community. The schools call, we escort the football team or the baseball team, or they probably don't even like it anymore because we do it so much, but the parents like it. So I guess, that's what matters. They call us, we do it. So, but, and then we started buying and selling fire apparatus. So we'd find used apparatus on, Gov Deals or Renee Bates or whatever, and just buy them, use them for a couple of years, fix them up, sell them for a profit, and then put that money back into buying a nicer one. So then we got an air and light truck that way. We got that's how we have our tower now. We started with the county helped us. We got a little telesquirt, E1 telesquirt. We kept it for about 4 years, sold it, put all the money back into a 70-foot mid-mount tower from up in the Metroplex. We got an auction for 25 grand, put about, I don't know, 7 grand in it, getting it in shape, ready to go. Used it for 5 years, sold it to another department south of us for 45 grand. And then we had an air and light truck that we bought the same way. We sold it for 45 grand. We put all that money to our tower. And so we only had to finance a small amount for the tower. So, but
Yeah, I think the fundraiser route, I look at the fundraising stuff exactly kind of like I look at the traditional recruiting method of where you just hang the help wanted on sign on the door and no one shows up and you can't figure out why. Times have changed. You have to recruit to a different generation in a different medium. And I think fundraising's kind of the same thing. It's cake sales are useless. Barbecues, catfish fries. Now I understand because we have other departments around us, north and south, that still do their fish fries. And they do it knowing that they may even lose money, but they do it to kind of support their community. And I'm perfectly fine with that. But one of those departments south of us last year realized, like, let's do the fish fry, but let's actually put the word out that we need stuff. Like actually let the community know that a need exists and you have a message. And to their credit, they did a phenomenal job of actually ground pounding that and getting the word out. And the day they had their event, good Lord, I couldn't believe how many damn people showed up to the thing. And they made a colossal amount of money, and they turned around and were able to buy their Hamatro extrication tools. And it's because they changed their message completely. It wasn't just, hey, come show up and support us. It was, hey, there's a need and you're going to help. And that was the difference for them. It made a huge difference. Now they did a silent auction. They had
raffles. They had all the
whole bunch of other stuff. But I would argue that even the silent auction, I don't think they needed that. Because there was a lot of people that showed up to that stuff and had no interest in doing anything with the silent auction stuff. And they had some phenomenal silent auction and raffle stuff. They did. The fact of the matter is this. What a standard fire truck costs from a manufacturer today, assuming that you're not buying from, Uncle Knick-Knack's bait and tackle store and fire shop. Okay, an engine today is going to be $800,000 when you put equipment on it. Maybe $900,000. 2 years ago, that truck fully equipped was $725,000. The bunker gear, the SCBAs, just all the tools and stuff. The cost is so astronomical, and we have to start considering options beyond, again, cake sales and fish fries. And I don't know how far down that road you want to go, but I know you guys are pursuing an ESD. What for your guys's, what made you really think, how's this the next step forward? Why go in that route?
So ESD, is basically a property tax, or you could do zero property tax and go for the sales tax. So a couple of years ago, the Texas legislature or whatever prohibited cities from forcefully annexing. So cities can't just go out and say, hey, we want that. So now the only way to annex into a city is voluntarily. So what that's done is it's driven growth in unincorporated areas. So how are we going to protect those areas? We go to the county, they say, oh, well, we'll give you a little bit more money, but The reality is what they're proposing to give is not enough to run a fire department. So the city that the department's in, they give us some money, but the reality is our district is 150 square miles, and the city covers about 2 square miles.
Yeah,
So-
your city's truly tiny.
Yeah.
What's your actual population here? Is it even 2,000?
Probably just under, maybe 1,500 to 2,000.
And you don't have a Home Depot's,
Right.
big box,
Right.
Walmart. You don't have.
We have the Dollar General,
Right.
which to put into perspective, when the Dollar General came, it doubled the sales tax revenue of the city.
Yeah.
So, because they didn't have to drive to the next town over to go to Walmart anymore for that gallon of milk. But yeah, so the reality is most of our growth is out in the county, and there's no way to fund protecting that. And at some point, it's picked up over the last 18 months or so. It's really exploding. But the reality is, by the time the county commissioners and the powers that be see it and want to do something about it, we're already going to be 5 years behind. So that's why
just
we
the
proceeded.
standard way things are done.
And the problem is that, again, I consider you're a very strong organization, but it's one thing to have a really strong organization that covers, and I'm going to just make up numbers here, 500 calls 5 years ago, and now you're covering 1,800 calls with the same amount of people on the same budget. That's not how that works. My fuel line item this year increased 86%. That's one line item that has a direct cost. What do you think everything else did? And I have the luxury of having the ability to literally go sit in front of people that figure out budgets, and I present mine, and then they approve it. And I think this concept that ESDs, I can truly understand why volunteers that truly care about their organizations kind of get their feathers ruffled at face value on the first glance of an ESD. But I think for me, one of the things I really like about your particular ESD is it's not, for a lack of better words, it's not a career ESD. It's an ESD that supplements the volunteers. And I really think there should be more focus on that. And because if you go to that route, you got a tax base, you have a budget, allocations. My organization has a tax base with an allocation. Mm-hmm. I mean, and it makes, in the long run, it makes your life so much easier, because what it does do is it doesn't force you to be panicked about your fish fry and trying to figure out how the hell you're going to buy tires. And I truly think that ESDs, they have a time and a place for the discussion. And the fact of the matter is that it's not a discussion about the 300 calls. That's not what this is about. It's about, and you may not be at the 1,800 right now, but here's a compounding factor. My particular city is having an intergovernment battle, and it's got a delay on a major infrastructure project, which has caused a moratorium to be put on my town. And okay, that's awesome for me. Dust the old hands off and bounce down the road. I have a guaranteed fixed set of no population increase for X amount of time. Sweet. We're one of the fastest growing areas in the country. So I have nothing but straight benefit from this. That's the town, not the county. Mm-hmm. What the hell's going on in the county? Well, all that movement that was coming into my area, it just got distributed almost evenly across the rest of the county. And I think this is one thing that kind of got, I don't want to say ignored, but it was never really considered, the long-term impact of this. And the growth was coming regardless to your district. The difference is that you ended up picking up, you already had a 30% increase plus a compounding 25% increase that got shoved out to you. And yeah. And again, in your particular district, you've got the biggest district in the county. Yes, there's a lot of rural in there too. That doesn't mean that some housing developer's not coming in with some big damn housing subdivision, and he's putting in 300, 400, 500 homes. And again, that
in the middle of nowhere.
In the middle of nowhere, and that one subdivision automatically turns into 70% of your call volume, because it's happening to me. I've got one subdivision that's insane. When it's completed, it will increase my population by 50%. That one subdivision. And I'm already in a town of 11,000 people. That's how big that subdivision is.
Yep.
So the moral of the story is, don't be afraid to go look at your other funding options. And I think one thing that's really staggering to me, and Jesse, you can probably attest to this a lot more because of your original home. You've seen a lot more of the true rural, small community, middle of nowhere. I don't know why more departments outside of our area that are that classic fish fries, bake sales, broke, always needing money, why they don't actually hit up at least their local cities or even their counties for funding.
The big problem, you get into rural areas like that where everything's ag exempt. It doesn't matter what, like an ESD, you can have one, but all that ag exempt stuff's wash out of it. And so it's really no money. So like we looked at it years ago in the county I came from, and it was literally $300,000 a year in revenue. It wasn't worth what it was going to take to do for $300,000 because everything's ag exempt at that point. And then your true industry stuff, they want to be carved out their chunk where they don't have to pay the full rate and blah blah blah, and they get their workarounds on all that stuff. It wasn't enough money to make it worth doing, and that's in the true rural setting where things are in that ag exempt class. And I know you've got area out here that's still ranches and it's still farms, and that stuff doesn't play into it. It takes houses and stores and stuff like that to get it to where it's worth doing. You've got to have houses.
But isn't 300 grand?
Well,
yeah, that's about 240 grand more than I'm getting currently. So.
And that 300 grand, it was going to be divided amongst 7 departments. So
that was countywide.
That was countywide in a county that's 1,200 square miles. So divide that in 7 departments and
just call it $4,000.
Yeah, you're not getting anything. I mean,
sorry, $40,000. $40,000.
Yeah, and you had departments that were doing 60 or 70 on a fish fry. They didn't care about that. That wasn't to have to answer to another layer of government too. That's because there's a board involved in that you're asking permission and you're wanting their blessing for the things you're trying to do. And there's an independent streak and all that. And there's some politics.
I can argue though because you're talking about the board side of it. I can promise you from my personal experience that we should look at a board. I do. I look at a board, particularly comparing it to like these two scenarios. We'll talk directly. So my city, when I go to talk to them, even though I am literally a Labrador in a party hat, okay, when I talk to them, they actually listen because there's a certain amount of, for lack of better words, responsibility that I have, okay? Whereas when I have to to work with the county, it's so impossible.
Yeah, well, part of that is that super conservative, physical conservative idea that anything you do to save 25 cents is what you have to do. And most of them don't get past that point. So even if the 300 grand would have been useful, and it would have, I mean, there's no doubt it would have been useful, they weren't willing to do what it took to make it happen because it was just outside of the scope of what they wanted to do. Even if it was 10 cents 100, which is kind of the going rate on that stuff, that even at 10 cents 100, they weren't willing to ask for it.
I think for me, it always, I'm going to get to use my favorite quote here. The difference between commitment and involvement is like a ham and eggs breakfast. The chicken was involved and the pig was committed. And when we have these fire department fiscal discussions, and I compare the city or the county, the city's committed, and that's directly represented in everything that we have. Whereas our county, they're involved, and they only want to be involved. And it's an incredibly, I can say this, it is so frustrating from my perspective, being on the outside looking in, knowing 100% that my breakfast is already made. And I look at it and I'm like, wow. And the last thing I'll say on this is that sometimes the things that are said that hurt, it's because they made an impact.
Yeah.
And you maybe need to give just a little more consideration to that. Now, I can completely understand, because ultimately this is the crux that all of us are in. We're in an exceedingly conservative area, and all of our politicians are exceedingly conservative. In the second that you even sniff at a tax hike or mention something about taxes, they recoil. I can understand that, and I can even work with that. The problem is that even being able to have the discussion in any capacity.
But part of being conservative is using your tax money to provide your basic services.
Right.
Water, sewer, infrastructure, fire, police, EMS. Like all the other stuff is fluff.
And I would tell you that it's coming from a broke volunteer fire department, because we truly were. I mean, my budget was 30 grand a year. I mean, I ran a fire department on $30,000 a year. It's our fault because we did that. We made that happen, and we made it successful at such a low level of funding that became the norm and what was expected of us. And I mean, we have to take the responsibility for part of that, because we literally brought that on ourselves.
That was our budget countywide 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So,
and 3 years ago was 18,000.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, but I will say that for all the county's faults, they have, since the time I started in '98 to now, we have a lot more county funding. We used to get nothing. So now we have a repair budget. We have somewhat of a fuel budget. So the things they have gotten us has allowed us to use the money that we get in donations or fundraisers or like our annual mailer to use that to improve the department instead of just existing. Whereas before it went to keep stuff running, buy fuel, pay for insurance. So I will say, could we use more? Yeah, a lot more. But the things they do has helped us better the department, I guess.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, I'll obviously agree with that. And I mean, it's been a benefit to everyone that's all 9 organizations that's part of it. The problem is, and I think what Jesse just said is really kind of like the most important thing there is that a lot of the organizations take so much pride in their organization that, for lack of better words, it's almost like admitting defeat, when you go up and you say, you do your best Oliver Twist impersonation, and you fold your hand behind your back with your hat, and you're like, more, please. And the first time someone's squeaking about that, it gets ruffled. And I mean, even our budget, gosh, even in my time on the organization 12 years ago, I don't even know if it was 200,000 total. I mean, when I became chief, I increased our budget by almost 40%. And oddly enough, I did it by telling him I was decreasing the budget. And it was just because all I did is modernize, standardize, and itemize the living hell out of our budget and made it to where there was literally nothing to argue. Because I just present it to them and be like, no, we need 300 C batteries because we have these pieces of equipment and we were going to replace all the batteries, and this leaves us 20 as spare. There's nothing to cut. And that was probably one of the bigger things that I did. But like I said, it resulted in the last 2.5 years of a 40% increase. And
I think too we're victim of our own success because we're doing well countywide. I would put these guys up with a lot of other counties around us, and like we do a good job, so there's perceived that there's no problem.
right.
So just like the police, when they want more money, they say, "Hey man, we got some crime over here. Gangs are picking up. We need some more money for gang activity." And then the next year they come back and say, "Hey man, gangs are taken care of, but traffic's getting bad. We need traffic enforcement money." So,
But they never gave back the gang money.
right, exactly. So we do a good job. We respond to calls. We put the fires. I would say we're much better now than we were 20 years ago. But maybe we're better. Maybe we have better equipment. I don't know. But we put out fires better than we used to. So perceive there's no problem. So why give us more money if we're doing great?
And that's back to my point. Like you literally made it happen with what you got, and it becomes what's expected of you to just continue to make it work, whatever you got to do. And you're going to do that because the alternative is way worse to actually not make it work. I mean, you're not going to just go, well, we're out of gas.
Yep.
Sorry, we'll wave at you.
No responding anymore.
Yeah. You're going to figure it out. I mean, you'll hijack a gas truck if it comes down to it.
It's just not an option.
Yeah.
I mean, you just, not a single one of us wants to be, I mean, that'd be like the absolute most demoralizing thing for the organization and the chief is to be at that point. And I mean, God forbid if you're just trying to prevent that from happening. I know that we had some guests walk in and they're here to take care of some business real quick. So we're going to pause.
We're about an
real
hour
quick.
in, so we can pause, we can wrap it up, we can do whatever.
Let's pause real quick.
Okay.
And we're back. We're starting to get a little bit long in the tooth here, and we were kind of figuring out what we're going to segue off into, and we were just sitting here bouncing ideas off each other. And Matt, what do you... God, I just forgot. We were talking about station locks. What were we talking about before that?
Ownership, pride of
Yeah,
ownership.
pride and ownership,
making
yeah.
your department better, that kind of stuff.
How do you recommend for your organization? What are some things that you've done in the past or currently for pride and ownership?
So, man, going back a long way or several years, we used to build our own apparatus. So we built 3 brush trucks. We built our EMS squad, and so when people have their own hands in things, they really have a lot of pride in that they built it and they want to take care of it. But as we've grown some, just started buying stuff, I don't know, I think you can make people have pride in it by putting them in charge of it, I guess. So we have like our apparatus, or we have people that are assigned to each truck. That's their job to take care of. But like going a little deeper, like personnel-wise, a way to make people have pride and ownership is to don't limit them, like value their opinion. And like when we're on scene, or even our new guys, all the way up to our command staff here, I expect them to take stuff out, play with it. I don't say there's no truck here that one person, like they might not drive it on a scene, but any vehicle here, yeah, let's pull it out, let's set it, let's play with it, because that's the time I want them to learn it is,
Right.
when not an emergency, but also allow them to make decisions, because if you never let them make a decision, then they won't. They either won't be able to, or they just won't. So, and even if it's a bad decision, we'll talk about it like, hey man, that decision kind of sucked. Here's maybe what I would have done, but like to me, the only wrong decision is no decision.
Yeah,
So-
exactly what you're talking about. That absolutely bit us in the ass. So all of our old guards retired. We had a whole bunch of young guys, and they were all kowtowed to the point where they'd be on scene. They know what the hell to do, and they won't do it because they're waiting to be told to go do it. And hell, I saw it once on a fire. They're just standing there with their thumbs, and it's like, what in the hell are you doing? And they're like, well, what do you want us to do?
What you're supposed to do.
You see the fire, right? Go to it. And then after that, it was fine. And, coming out of that, asked them about it, and it was
Big part of that was that, if every decision they ever make is wrong,
Yeah.
they instantly quit making decisions. And I've seen that in the career side. You get some domineering guy, chief, that just, everything is questioned and you can't flush the toilet properly. Well, guess what? Pretty soon nothing happens. Nothing gets done other than what has to be done.
Yeah, the kind of come back to the pride and ownership. I don't want to say it's the most important part of an organization, but I'd put it at least in the top 3. I mean, it might be number 2. Might. I mean, I would hate to confine any organization to saying this is your one thing and this is it, nothing else will be included. So I always hate kind of putting things on a list like that. But boy, when you see an organization that's having problems with that, God, does it stand out? Particularly when you're an organization that actually does it. And you stumble into someone that's struggling with that, and it's just like, oh, God, thank Christ we're not dealing with that.
Mm-hmm. And I think another thing that's very important is leading from the front. Like you can't, I make my officers and stuff, if we wear our seatbelts most of the time, at least in the front. So I don't leave the bay till everybody's seatbelted up, and I expect that of my officers, because how can we expect everyone else to do it, if we don't? So, and I don't limit it. I'm not one of those guys that, every rule is enforced all the time. Like even our SOGs, every rule in there could be broken or there's a reason to break it. So that's why they're SOGs instead of SOPs. So you can't. You just have to lead from the front, let people make decisions, and live and die on those decisions. I mean, figuratively, not literally, but.
Well, there's a certain part of this that literally is raw experience, hands-on, and the fact of the matter is that no education, no background, no fundamentals, and you did it for 20 years, you're gonna figure out a system that's gonna keep you alive and ultimately get the job done. And holding people to a standard is good.
The reality is if you're the one making 100% of the decisions and nobody else can make a decision or won't make a decision, or they're ridiculed for making a decision, what happens when you're not there?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a bad day in Black Rock. Mm-hmm. Like you can't function like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's just like Uvalde. That guy was probably made all the decisions, and
yeah.
he wasn't even there, and he was telling them, hey, maybe you should do this. And like, oh, he's command. Let's go do that. And you see how that turned out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know that to be fact, but that's
how it
looks on the surface.
It's a perfect example of this is that you have a system in place, and it comes down to this is how we do it. This is how we operate. And you have one guy who made a decision and not a single person checked it. No one just said, question, concern, comment. No. And that didn't happen because that is not their structure. Because God Almighty rules from upon high, and you don't question it. That's a contributing factor to this, even though unfortunately there was this very public case of there should have been some other motivating factors to consider the decisions being made. And that's, where's our 7 deadly sins?
Yeah.
Hubris. I mean, just so narrow-minded that be damned, we will do it this way because that's how I said we're going to do it. And it does. It gets you in huge damn trouble sometimes. I mean, you see it occasionally even on the fireside, West Texas. Don't get me wrong. I'm not blaming them guys there. I'm not doing that. That was Bad News Bears all the way across the board.
Yeah, that started way before the fire happened, as far as the conditions they had.
But there's other extenuating factors. Events don't just this one thing that I appreciate from my aviation background, because this was beat into me early. Accidents don't just happen. It's not just some random thing that happened. It's almost like a comical Rube Goldberg device where you had to have a series of events perfectly happen. You had an airplane that wasn't maintained well. You had a mechanic that was having a bad day at work. He forgot to tighten the screws. He went ahead and just because that's what he does, he signed all of his paperwork off normally. The guy that inspected the work just rubber stamped it. The plane went on a delivery flight with no problems. The person that pre-flighted the airplane before it was delivered didn't check the airplane properly. Then goes to the next pilot for the next flight. Same thing. Pre-flight wasn't actually done properly. Flight goes for 3.5 hours. Then the window falls out, the cockpit window. And the captain literally got sucked out the front of the airplane and held in place by the first officer. True story.
He actually lived.
Yeah. And that was because a mechanic didn't tighten bolts. Now, that's a little bit on the extreme side, but aviation's got a whole bunch of extreme when you have accidents. And they all go back. That's why the NTSB exists. It's one of the most fascinating forms of bureaucracy out there, because you want to talk about a group that dives to the true root of the cause that started the chain reaction. And it always goes back to personnel, behavior, and on and on. And it all comes back to in-house. In-house. How well are you handling your business in-house? And that's applicable to any scene that we have. Good practices on scene aren't built on scene. They're built in-house.
Mm-hmm. And that's going back to letting people do stuff around the station. Like if you don't let them work on stuff around here, get familiar with it, run the ladder, set the truck. Trevor, he's 17. He can pull the truck out and get it set and get the aerial in the air. And so, but like, you can't expect them on scene. Like, you can't yell at them on scene and make them do better. If you see somebody yelling at somebody for not knowing or messing up on scene, like, that's because we let them down earlier than that by not training them or not.
Absolutely.
Well, and here's just a raw fact of volunteerism. We don't get to have every 3 days or every 4 days hands-on with the apparatus. And there are times, good, bad, or indifferent, when someone's operating a truck apparatus, and it's been a hot minute since they've been with it. They may not remember where stuff's at. And having everyone in your organization familiar with that truck just helps alleviate some of that. Because, again, you're on an emergency scene. You need things to happen right now. and you just got tunnel vision or you just brain farted and you completely missed it. And you can just ask someone real quick, hey, what's this? Where's it at? And be done with it. And not have it be a big deal. So I think that's something good to close with there. Unless, Jesse, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I'm good.
How about you, Matt?
No, I don't guess so. There's always stuff. We could sit here for 6 hours and talk about stuff.
Right.
But
Yeah, that's the crazy thing is that, especially with your background and perspective, I would appreciate having you on more. And it's just, we could do word soup like this, or you can come in with something very specific if you want. Past that, thank you for listening. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, inquiries, inquisitions, concerns, then email us at ittastslikeBurningcast@gmail.com. Still waiting on that proverbial email. Sooner or later, someone's going to send something.
We did get one, but
Oh, that's right.
yeah, we early on. But definitely leave a review too if you get the opportunity. All that helps, and it's. We've said it before, this is fun and we're doing it for fun and it's great conversation, but I mean, a little feedback would be awesome, and it is growing and we love to see that, so help it grow some more.
All right. Appreciate it, guys. Have a good evening.